This is Joel, and in this video we will talk about BYOD, right? I've been getting a lot of requests on my comments asking me to do this, and I kind of pushed it for a while because it takes a little more time to explain this and do a demo with it. But then finally I thought, why not? Let me do this. Right, so yeah, in this video, at first we are gonna spend few minutes trying to understand the concept, and then we'll get into the lab. Okay, so when you're trying to understand BYOD, one of the very important topic or concept to be understood is the certificate-based authentication. Okay, so cert-based auth. Okay, now typically we have seen in the earlier videos, or maybe you would have seen or you would have practiced simple authentication like MS-CHAP v2, right, where you put in your username and password and the ISE basically goes and checks it against some internal store or probably against Active Directory, and it is going to accept your request or deny it. But in certificate-based authentication, what happens? You've got your ISE here. You've got your client. The client is producing or sending you a certificate, right? And it is asking you, to authenticate you to the network. So as a ISE, how do you do this? So there are a bunch of steps which happen in the background, right? The very first step is check if this certificate, right, which is presented by the client, check if it is signed by a trusted CA. That's very important. The CA is very important. What is CA? CA is nothing but a certificate authority. ISE can act as a CA itself, or generally you will have an external CA, right? So you can have a generally external CA. I don't know if I have it open here to show you guys. Yes, I do have it. So this is my CA. A very common CA is using the Microsoft AD CA, right? So yeah, that's going to be generally your CA. And what the ISE is going to do is, it's going to take the certificate which is presented to you, and it is going to check if it is signed by a certificate authority, right? So the CA can be within the ISE, or it can be an external entity as well. But whatever it is, the very important piece here is you need to make sure that the CA's root certificate is imported into ISE, right? So that ISE can trust this CA. Only then ISE can trust that CA, right? So only then it will be able to do this step, which is validate the certificate presented to it by this client, right? So that certificate has to be imported into ISE. Okay, and the second thing is not just importing, you should also make sure that you enable that certificate authority for authentication. So let me actually show you this while I explain this, right? So if I probably go to my ISE, let's go to probably I don't know, maybe administration certificates, and let's go to trusted certificates, and there you go. This is my root CA. So if I click on this guy and maybe click on edit, and you can see here it is trust for authentication, right? Trust for authentication for Cisco services and trust for authentication within ISE, right? So that should be enabled. Otherwise ISE will not be able to use this certificate for for checking, right? For validating this one. Second thing is, make sure that you have your NTP, right, network time protocol, right, set correctly on both your client and on the ISE. Everything should be synchronized because certificates, they all depend upon time, right? So there is some validity time and all of that. There's like a start time and there's like an end time which will validate that certificate. So you need to make sure that all the devices in your network have the correct NTP. Third thing is, there are two interesting concepts called CRL or OCSP, right? I'll not dig deeper into these guys because it's kind of little away from our discussion. But the idea here is that what if a certificate was issued to you, right? What if a certificate was issued to the client, right, by the CA server, and because of some reason, maybe that certificate was revoked, right? Maybe the certificate was cancelled, taken back, right? Because maybe the client was found to be malicious or something, right? So CRL is basically nothing but a kind of like non-real-time way of doing it. So CRL will basically be like a CSV file or a list of certificates which have been revoked, and they'll be generally posted on a HTTPS site, and ISE will have to regularly go there and check if the certificate is valid or not, right? Whereas OCSP is kind of like a protocol which is more real time, right? So using some APIs, you can quickly poll and you can quickly check, okay, is the certificate valid or not? It's kind of like an optional step, but better to do it while you do the certificate based authentication, right? Just to make sure that the certificate was issued to the client, but it is still valid and it has not been revoked, right? So that's that step. Step number 4 is very interesting, right? Validate the proof of possession. So this is important. Let me explain this. Hope my spelling is correct. Okay, so what are we trying to do here is, okay, so the client has presented the certificate to us, but how do we make sure that the client actually possesses the actual private key and public key, right? Because any certificate, when you talk about any certificate, you have two things. You've got the private key and you've got the public key. That is how the PKI works, right? The whole funda behind PKI is that you can encrypt the data using, say, private, and you can decrypt it using public, correct? So it's an asymmetric way of encryption, right? Cryptography, basically. Basically, when a client comes and tells you that, look, I have this certificate, the understanding is that the client also has the private key, right? But a malicious client might not have that private key. If a malicious client has successfully stolen this public key from public key is something which is generally, you don't even have to steal it. I mean, you in most of the protocols, in most of the signaling, you actually give out the public key. So we want to make sure in this case that the client, right, has both the private key and public key in its possession. So what we do here is, in the 4th step, so I'll try to again simplify this. I mean, in the backend, it's probably not going to work exactly like this, but there is what we call as a throwaway data, right? A throwaway data is basically, think of it as any, string of data, whatever, right? It is encrypted. So the ISE sitting here, what it will do is it will encrypt that data using what? Using its public key, using its private key and the public key of the client, right, which was presented in the certificate, and it will send that challenge back to the client. Now the client should decrypt it what? Using its private key and the public key of the ISE, right? So by doing that, ISE can make sure that this client really possesses both, combination of both the private key and public key, and it is not actually impersonating some other client, right? So these are 4 important steps which are needed for certificate based authentication. I just wanted to give a little bit of glimpse. Now this was just the theory, but which protocol actually does this? The most common protocol which we use for certificate based authentication is called as EAP-TLS. Now EAP-TLS is used directly, or sometimes it is also used in a tunneled way, right? So tunneled way is basically where the outside tunnel will be created using EAP-TLS, but then inside the tunnel we'll probably use something like PEEP or something, right? Some other protocol inside, right? But anyway, so this is the protocol which actually enables you to do all these 4 steps which I talked about, right? Whatever I talked about was just theory, but the protocol itself which enables you to do this is EAP-TLS. Okay, just a bit of theory out there. Now let's come to the important part which we are talking is the BYOD part, right? So let me just get off this stuff from my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, so BYOD, bring your own device. Now we have started seeing, I think not now, right? I think since probably, I don't know, maybe somewhere in 2010, 2011, what we have seen is a lot of people who come to the office to work, they have started preferring working on their own personal devices, be it their phones, be it their iPads, be it their laptops, and so on, right? So this just brings a lot of attack vector into the network, right? Because a personal laptop, which you get probably might not have all the antivirus systems in place. It might not be running the best operating system or the most patched operating system and so on, right? So, but at the same time, the employees really like this to use their own flexible devices to work on stuff. So how do we kind of do this? How do we make sure, the make sure part is actually probably taken care by another technology inside ISE called as posture, which probably, if time permits in future, we'll touch upon, right? But in BYOD, what we look at is how quickly can we onboard these devices, right, which the employees are bringing in. How quickly can we onboard them into the network and get some visibility into them and then provide them some access, right? That's what we are trying to do, right? And all the other stuff which I talked about, like posture, and then there's something called as MDM, right, which is again trying to figure out if the device is running all the required patches and so on. So all of that is probably another discussion in place. In BYOD, let's just talk about only the onboarding part. How quickly can we onboard these devices into the network and provision them and get them to at least some extent so that we can allow them to talk to our network, right? So that's what we are trying to do. That's the main goal here. Now when you talk about BYOD, right, you've got two ways of doing it. One is using single SSID and the other one is using dual SSID. Okay, so so with single SSID, what happens, right? So with single SSID, let's just go through the flow, right? And obviously we'll talk more about single SSID and so on while we configure it, but just to give you the flow, what happens is you as the name suggests, you have an SSID, like a corporate SSID. You'll see that when we do the demo, right? So you have this SSID and the user first comes and connects. Okay, so the user comes and connects, and to make this interesting, let's assume that in this company or in this enterprise, they have enabled certificate-based authentication, just now what we talked about, right, which is EAP-TLS. Let's assume that they have enabled EAP-TLS for all their devices, right, and only certificate-based authentication is allowed. Now the user who is here is coming in say with a Windows machine or some kind of iPad, which is not a corporate asset, it's a personal device. And using this device is going to connect to the corporate SSID using what? Username and password. Username password, which is not EAP-TLS, right? Username password is something like as simple as MSCHAP v2. So as soon as the SSID sees that, it is going to understand that it's obviously going to authenticate because it's going to understand that, okay, this is a legitimate user because the username and password is correct, right? But then it is also going to understand that this particular device doesn't have the certificate, so it can't do EAP-TLS. So we need to now provision this device so that we can do, so that's where the BYOD workflow gets triggered. Okay, so the user will be redirected to what we call as a BYOD portal, right? There'll be a portal where the user you can register the device, right? So the user will register the device. When you say register, it's basically going to put the description of the device, maybe the MAC address and so on. And once the device is registered, there is generally some configuration which has to be done on the device, on the client, right? Some kind of a supplicant configuration, maybe some kind of a certificate has to be provisioned. In case of EAP-TLS, it is nothing but you have to provision some certificate. Again, there are hundreds of different combinations you can do. Maybe you want to do with certificates, you don't want to do with certificates and so on. But for our simple understanding, just to keep everything in place, we are going to assume that the device did not have any certificates. The device doesn't have a supplicant configured. So to enable it for EAP-TLS, we want the certificates, right? So now we need to provision those certificates. We need to generate those certificates and we need to issue those certificates. So that also is taken care as part of the BYOD workflow, right? Once the certificate is issued to the client, what else should be done? So now we know that the client is all good. It has the certificate in place and all of that. We have some kind of accountability, right? In case this device does some kind of expose some kind of malicious behavior, we can catch hold of that employee and we can penalize him, right? So we have all the identity of this device now. So now what generally happens is COA, right? Change of authorization. So it was earlier connected to this corporate SSID with some kind of a limited access, literally no access. I mean, it was just connected and the access was only to this particular BYOD portal, right? But now that we have completed the BYOD workflow, there is a change of authorization which is given, and now the device which was here, right, will be able to, so the device, will be able to access the corporate network, like all the resources inside. Basically, the accesses or privileges are elevated now, right? So that's very simple. That's the single SSID work plan. This is actually what we are going to demo as well. Let me get rid of that just to talk about the other one, and then we can jump on to the demo. I know the theory is always a bit boring. You will find it really fun when we get to the demo. So in, what is this? In the dual SSID. In dual SSID, as the name suggests, you have two SSIDs, right? The first SSID is generally open or with some very, very limited authentication, like some kind of, it will be generally something like a constant username password. It won't be .1x wireless. It would be something like WPA2, right? Personal edition, not the enterprise edition. So it'll be either open for all our practical purposes. Let's assume it is open. So the client is again, the user is basically coming with the client, is connecting to that open SSID. And by open, I say there is no username password, so anyone can connect. As soon as he is connected, what is presented? We are going to present him with a guest portal. Basically for WebAuth, right? Very similar to the guest portal which we saw in the previous video, right? A web authentication happens. So here, once the web authentication happens, the user is going to put the right, username and password, right? And if the username and password is belonging to a particular AD, let's say the AD group of employees, ISE understands that, okay, this is a valid employee and he has brought a new device into the campus. So we need to add it to our BYOD now, right? So from here, he is basically redirected to the BYOD portal. Okay. And obviously, very same workflow like earlier, device is registered. Okay. And you'll basically get a message that, okay, you're all good. You've all registered the device. Now you are good to go and connect to the corporate SSID. So as a second step, he'll have to take the same device, right? This time he'll have to connect to the corporate SSID. Let me use a different color. Corporate SSID. Okay. And here obviously we'll check if the device is registered or not. Is this registered? If the device is registered, we will permit him access, otherwise it will be denied, right? So if these are two different ways of doing it. There's obviously a single SSID way of doing it, and then there is obviously dual SSID way. There are a few differences. Like I said, there is obviously, in case of dual SSID, the web authentication is an extra layer here, just to keep it clean, just to keep it completely different, just to make sure that if you're bringing a device, you're not directly connecting to the corporate SSID. If that's your requirement, then you can go with the dual SSID. And yeah, that's mainly it. So those are two different ways of doing it, right? And now we'll actually get to the demo and we'll configure the whole situation. Before we get to the demo, let me just give you a quick understanding of my topology here, right? Pretty simple. I have nothing but my, I'm not going to talk about my UCS and stuff, right? I'm just going to talk about my switch. I have a switch here, and to that switch I've connected my AP. Okay, so I have my AP over there, and this switch is then connected to what? We have an ISE, right? That's what is of interest for us, and there is obviously WLC as well over here. Okay. And my client is, so this is the AP. So this is the AP which is giving out your signals. And then you've got my client sitting here, right? So this is the client with his, the user and the client with his laptop and whatnot, the BYOD devices. So this is the topology what we have, right? And for this whole section, for the upcoming section, we are basically going to configure this guy. We're going to configure this guy, right? And we are going to make this whole thing work where this particular user, whenever he brings in a BYOD device, right, it will basically get registered on the ISE, and he'll be provided access to the corporate network, right? So that's why I'm going to check. So yeah, let's move on to that, folks. We'll start with the demo now. We'll actually be doing the single SSID onboarding, right? Maybe you can use the same lab and extend it in future, and you can do probably the dual SSID as well, right? First things first, let me take you through my WLC configuration. I've already configured it, so I don't want to waste a lot of time doing it on the video. So let me take you through the main bits of the configuration of WLC, and then we'll concentrate more on the ISE part here, okay? So coming to our WLC, what do we have here? So in the WLC, let's look at the WLAN configurations, okay? So now I have two SSIDs here because I was obviously testing dual SSID onboarding and stuff, but for our lab, actually only the first SSID will be used, right? But I still want to show you the configurations of both of them, right? Let's start with the guest. So the guest will basically have a SSID name. It will be enabled. Make sure that you enable MAC filtering. That's very much important. Then you would basically have, let's go to security, and here you go. That's where you enable MAC filtering, right? And in the security in layer 2, you can even keep it as an open SSID, right, completely open, or you can use a personal WPA2 as well, right? That way you'll have to provide a key over here. It could be any key, right? Cisco 123 or whatever, right? Key, so that the users will, so that any random users will not be able to use the open SSID and get to the BYOD. Rather, we are trying to make sure that we give some kind of a passcode, some kind of a key using which users can come and connect to the guest, and from there they can go with the BYOD, right? Not compulsory to do this. There are many networks out there where they have like literally none, which is completely open. But yeah, you can have a WPA2 setup here as well, okay? So that's about the layer 2. In the layer 3, we're gonna have it as completely none. The AAA servers are important. Make sure that you have your ISE set up here, right? This is my ISE 60.8. The port is 1812.1813 for authentication and accounting, right? That's very important. And so that's that. And what else? The next would be, very important piece would be the advanced section. So in the advanced section, make sure that you have this AAA override enabled, because that will be needed for your change of authorization, right? Which we'll basically use later in the while configuring stuff on the ISE side, right? So change of authorization is very important. Also make sure the other important piece here is the NAC state, right? You select the ISE NAC over there, okay? So that's I think mainly it, right? Okay, maybe there's one more piece, which is basically going down to security, and you'll have to go down to radius. Let's go to radius, and let's go to authentication, right? And this is the place where you'll basically add your radius server, right? This is important. So I've added my radius server, which is, like I said, 60.8, and you'll have to have a shared secret, right? This is basically the NAD configuration, right? I'm hoping that you've already added your WLC as a NAD to your ISE, right? In my case, I can show you quickly over here. Go to network devices, and there you go, right? That's my WLC over here. So I'm not gonna go to that part because that's again a complete different discussion, but I'm hoping that you have added, it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, right? So the WLC is added as a NAD on the ISE, and this is the place where you do the WLC side of configuration, put in the shared secret, and make sure you enable the support for COA over here, right? Change of authorization. Cool. So that's mainly about, so we talked about what? We talked about the guest VLAN, the guest SSID, but maybe I can also quickly show you about the corporate SSID as well. The same thing over here, right? Again, like I said, I'm not going to get into stuff like what is the interface over here and all of that, right? I think that all comes under your wireless configuration, right? But just to give you a glimpse, or just to quickly make you understand how this really works, in wireless, you can have multiple SSIDs running on the same controller, right? And so when you have multiple SSIDs, how do you segregate or how do you isolate traffic from one SSID with the other, right? The idea is pretty simple. You create a trunk interface, right? The WLC, when it is connecting to the network, it will connect to the network with a trunk interface. So different SSIDs will be carrying different tagged traffic. Like for example, the corporate traffic is getting tagged with the VLAN 1030, and that's the interface which is getting attached here, right? There's a different place where you have to go and create the interfaces and stuff, but that's, like I said, it's a completely wireless discussion. But coming back here, so on the corporate WLAN, which is the one which we'll be using mainly for our single SSID BYOD onboarding, the configuration is exactly same except on the layer 2 security part, right? So on the layer 2 security part, I can't really keep a corporate SSID open, can I? Because then everyone would be able to log into my network. So I need to go with the WPA2 Enterprise Edition here, right? And that's what I've enabled here. And then obviously in the advanced section, you've got the AAA stuff. All right, so in the advanced section, you've got the AAA override, and you've got the NAC state set to ISE NAC, so that's important. And I think that's mainly it, guys. So I think that's mainly from the WLAN side of things. Okay. Now let's see the other stuff, which is ACLs. ACLs are super important. So let's get to the security side of things. Okay. And maybe if you want to quickly have a look at my access point, this is my access point, right? That's the IP. It's all enabled. And for people who want to see my mode on what I'm running it on the Flex Connect mode, right? Cool. Coming to security, in the security side of things, let's get to probably ACLs because they are most important, right? Technically, to keep it simple, what I have done is I have repurposed my normal, WebAuth redirect ACL, right? The ACL which we used in the previous video to talk about guest portals, right? So, we used an ACL to redirect the traffic, right? The initial traffic which is coming out of the client, we don't want to permit that traffic, rather we want to redirect it all the way to the ISE, right? So that the whole, WebAuth and all of that happens after that, right? So that ACL, I'm just repurposing it. I did not even create a new ACL. I'm just using it. So let me just open that and show you what it does. The ACL has been written to permit what? To permit DHCP traffic. So these two are DHCP traffic. The next two lines are for the DNS. So that is also permitted, right? 50.13 is my DNS server. So the traffic for DHCP DNS is permitted. And what else? Let's scroll down. Then the traffic to the ISE is also permitted, obviously, because this is where the BYOD portals and all of that will reside. So permitting the traffic to the ISE as well. And then we are also permitting ICMP ping, not really necessary, but yeah, just for testing purpose, if you want to have, you can have. And these are the DNS public servers, I think Umbrella probably, and then the rest is all denied, right? So always remember that the way you configure this redirect ACLs is completely opposite to how you do it on the switches, right? The switches and the WLC, they work completely differently, right? Complete opposite way, right? So just remember this, that in a switch, when you configure a redirect ACL, right? And when you configure a redirect ACL and when you put a permit statement, right, it means that you're redirecting that traffic. But in this case, when you put a permit statement, it means that you are not redirecting the traffic. Rather, you're actually permitting it. The traffic here which will be redirected is basically this part of the traffic, right? Line starting from 10 to 14. 10 to 13, I guess. Yeah. Cool. So that's your redirect traffic, guys. So this all gets redirected. And so that's the ACL which I was talking about, right? So we've got that ACL up. So what do we have right now? We have created the SSIDs. Our AP is up. Our AP is in flex mode. We have created the simple access control list as well. Literally, you can use the one which we used in our earlier discussion, which is your guest portals. Okay. Now I think we are good from the WLC side, from the wireless side. I think we are good to go to our access to our ISE now. Okay. So with ISE, we'll have to start with some basic configuration. Okay. All right. So just one line before we actually get to it. right? So the basic understanding here is that if you're an employee of a company, right, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to do BYOD, but we are also assuming that the regular employees of a company, right, they will have access to the network using what? EAP-TLS, right? And EAP-TLS is a way of authentication where you use certificates, right? So we are using that logic here. What we are trying to do here is that we are trying to see if a user is logging in using any device, be it their phone, be it their laptop, be it their iPad, whatever, right? We are trying to see if a user is logging with a username password, right, which is as simple as, you know, the MS chap method of doing it, right? So we are checking if a user is logging into the network using the traditional username and password, and if they are doing that, we know that they are a legitimate user, right? They're the employee of a company because they have the username and password which is matching in the AD. So we provide them the BYOD interface where they can basically go and register their device, and they can start using, you know, corporate applications. They can start connecting to the corporate network using that device, right? So the assumption here is that an employee is going to finally get a EAP-TLS way of connecting to the network, right, which is the certificate based authentication. And we are also assuming that if the user is connecting to the network using a username and password, it means that he's a legitimate user, and we will provision his device so that he'll be able to use EAP-TLS going forward, right? That's the logic. We'll kind of use that logic throughout our policies and all of that. Okay, now let's do it step by step. This is very interesting. Okay, so let's start with the first step, right? Let's start by creating what we call as the native supplicant profile. Okay, the native supplicant profile, and this is very much needed. So let's go and do this. Let's go to the policy here and policy elements. Let's go to results. Okay, and let's go to client provisioning and resources. Okay, so when you come here, you see these are, think of this as some of the apps which are needed, you know, for doing certain BYOD operations on your client, right? And this behavior is going to be different for different types of clients. Like for example, you can use these pieces of softwares, let's call them as, right? You can use this for your Mac and Windows, but at the same time for, say, your Android, right, the process will be slightly different. The reason, because I think you probably know this, on Android you can't install apps from anywhere else apart from Google App Store, right? So I can't really create a app for your Android phone and I can't really host it over here, right? It has to be hosted on the Google Play Store. So there's a slightly different approach for Android. But anyway, we are not talking about Android. We are talking about mainly your Windows machines which will be provisioning here. But the logic kind of relates the same even for Mac as well. Okay, so these are some of the agents which are needed and which will be deployed on your client, which will then enable provisioning of all these certificates and all of that, right? So that's what we're going to do now. Okay, so what do we do first? Let's come to add, and one important thing which you can start with is some of these agents, right? Let me look at the latest one. Let me just do last update here. If you see that on the top we have the 2 rows which basically tells that these agents were downloaded today, because that's today's dates, right? But in your case, in your ISE, maybe that might not be the case, right? So in that case, you might want to download the latest agents. Like for my Windows, I need these 2 very important, Win SP Wizard and Cisco Temporal Agent Windows, right? So make sure you download the latest agents, and it's pretty simple to do that. You just need to say agent sources from Cisco site, right? And it will basically try to connect to Cisco website and it will try to get the latest version of those agents. Okay, there you go. And you just need to select whichever are the ones which you want, and you need to save it and it will download it, right? I'm going to cancel that because I already have them, the latest ones, but you can do that. So let's actually start by adding the profile now, right? So native supplicant profile, right? So native supplicant profile, what do we want to give this? We'll have to give some name, right? So let's say something like Mango, I don't know, maybe Mango TLS, right? So I'll call that as a Mango TLS, or maybe let's put a dash. Okay, so that's the name. You can give any name, not to worry. And the operating system, you can create different supplicant profiles for different operating systems, obviously, but in my case, since I just have Windows, I'm gonna say all, right? Come down here. This is the place where your whole SSID is coming to play, right? In our case, we're using the single SSID approach, so I'm gonna say add, okay, and we need the SSID name here. So where is my SSID? Let's go back to our WLC. Let's grab the SSID from here, right? So that's my SSID. I'm gonna copy that. Let's quickly come back here. Let's paste it. Okay. So we have the SSID in place. This will be WPA to enterprise. Allowed protocol. This is where we'll have to put TLS, and certificate template changes. Keep this as default. Scroll down. Authentication mode will be user or computer. And yeah, I think that's mainly it. So I'm gonna say save. Okay. So yeah, I think that's good. You can also do BYOD for probably wired as well, but I don't want right now. I'm just concentrating on my wireless. So I'm going to say save, and there you go. So your Mango TLS should appear here, right? So this is the native supplicant profile which you have created. So this will decide how your supplicant gets configured, right, on that BYOD device. Okay, so that's completely done. Next step is we need to get to something called as a client provisioning policy. So let's go and do that. So don't worry, it won't be under policy sets. It will be, you will have a separate tab called client provisioning. So let's go there. And once you come here, let's see, what do we have? Okay, so I was testing something else, I guess. So I have something here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably, let's go and okay, there's something for Windows already here, but actually let me create a new one. It's fine. So I'm going to say insert the policy below, no, probably above. Let's go with above. Okay, and I'm going to say here as well Mango Windows. So this is mainly, this policy is for Windows. For different clients, you can create different client provisioning policy. Okay, so like they say here, the client provisioning policy helps you to determine what users will receive upon logging and user session initiation. Right, so the version of the agent profile, all of that which we downloaded earlier, we will kind of attach it, we'll kind of add it over here. Okay, so identity groups, let's keep it all. Here let's select Windows, all, right? And the conditions probably you can put some conditions. I'm gonna keep it empty. And when it comes to results, what do we want? So this is for Windows, right? So let's see. We'll have to basically use the wizard, the Windows SP wizard, right, which I just now downloaded. This is basically an agent, right, which I just now downloaded, and I have the latest version, which is 3.0, so I'm going to use that, and the profile which I created a minute before, which was Mango TLS. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to save that. Okay, happy. So we have created the client provision policy. I think the next step would be to go with the portals. Let's clear out the portals. Okay, so when it comes to portals, again, if you are using dual SSID, you'll have 2 portals, and if you are having single SSID, you'll have 1 single portal, right? So for dual SSID, you would basically go down. I'm not going to do it, but let me quickly show you. So you go to work centers, guest access, and portal and component, right? Because in dual SSID, you have like the first portal which shows up is your guest portal, right? Where it's like a self-registered guest. So you can probably use something like this, right? The self-registered guest. So you can use this portal and maybe just enable it, right? And yeah, that should be it. So there should be a BYOD setting here. Okay, there you go, and you'll have to just enable that, right? So you can use the first portal will be the guest portal, and this is how you can use a self-registered portal for that. But in our case, we will not use this in our policy because we are going to have a single SSID BYOD onboarding, which means we can directly let the user jump onto the BYOD portal, right? So let's go to BYOD and let's go to portal and components. And this is the portal which we'll use. We don't have to configure anything. This is already set up there for you. It's already there by default. You can directly use it in the policy. You can obviously customize it and do some fun stuff, but I'm not worried about this. I can use it as is, right? So that's pretty good. So yeah, that's so I'm happy with that, right? So we talked about that. We talked about the portals part. Next would be I think let's go with the authorization profiles. So let's see. So let's go to authorization profile. So where do you do that? Let's go to policy elements again, right? Or maybe let's directly go to results, right? We can do that. So you've got authentication here and authorization here, right? While we are here, let me actually show you this. So on the authentication page, make sure whichever authentication you're using, right? Like in my case, I think I'm using the last one as my policy. So make sure that you enable EAP-TLS here, right? If you're using native EAP-TLS, you'll have to enable this one. And if you're using tunneled inside PEEP, you'll have to enable obviously PEEP, and you'll have to go and enable here, right? Or if you're using it inside something else, like for example here, if you're using something like EAP-TLS inside maybe TTLS, you'll have to enable this, right? In our case, we are using it natively, so I'm just gonna, this one should suffice actually. Okay, so that's important. Okay, cool. Where are we? So authentication, that was authentication allowed protocols, but main thing what we are interested is having the authorization profiles done. Okay, so let's go and create. Okay, so it looks like there is one which I had created earlier, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this and I'm going to create something new so that we all can learn from it, right? Cool. So let's go and create a new thing, and I'm going to say what, Mango BYOD. Let's call this as redirect, right? So this is the authentication profile, or sorry, authorization profile, which gets activated first, right? When the user when the user first connects to the SSID, he has to be redirected to the BYOD portal, right? So that's taken care by this one. Okay, so we put in the name, scroll down, and you will find something called, there you go, web redirection. Select that. And once you select that, let's come down here. What do we want? We want the native supplicant provisioning, right? So let's go and do that. What ACL do you want? So the ACL would be the ACL which I talked about earlier. So you'll go to security, access control list. There you go. And this is the ACL. So I'm gonna copy that. Can I copy it? Yeah. No. Okay. Let's copy it from here. Copy. Let's come here. Yeah. Put in the ACL over here. There you go. And what is the portal which you want to use? It will be the BYOD portal. Okay. Anything else? I think that's it. So we are going to hit the submit here. Okay. So there you go. We created the Mango BYOD redirect. Great. What else? I think time to now create the authorization rules. Okay. Which means let's go to our policy sets. Now there are so many policy sets, but you don't have to worry about anything starting from the second row, because everything we'll be doing it in the first one, right? The first row. The rest of the stuff is something related to some other use cases, but you can just concentrate on the first one. And observe here, this is the allowed protocol list which I'm using, right? And that's where I've enabled the EAP-TLS, which I showed you a minute ago. Okay, so I'm going to click on this arrow, and what do we have? This is what we have, right? So I have the wired.1x and wireless.1x, and I have already marked the SSID Mango Lab, the corporate SSID. Basically that's already added, but the two important things are authentication policy and authorization policy. Okay, so for authentication policy, what I'll probably do is let's see, I don't think I need to put a separate authentication policy only for this, right? So what I'm going to do is probably let's go and change this ID store to not just internal and corporate. Let's change this to all. Is that all? Not that. Okay, all user ID stores. Is that the one? I always get confused. Let's probably duplicate and check. on that, right? So that's very important, because we need to make sure that, because we are going to use EAP-TLS, right? For EAP-TLS, we need to make sure that the ID stores are not just username passwords, but rather certificates, right? The cap is very important. And so let me actually show you that. It's good to look at it, right? So if you go to probably work centers, where is administrator, let's go to administration. Okay, there you go. So identity source sequence, right? This is what you have. So this is the source sequence we are looking at. Make sure that you select certificate authorization profile here, right? Because this is important for your certificate based authentication, right? And yeah, so I think it should work because all 80 join points and everything is available here. So I think it should work. So yeah, let's just quickly change. Yeah, that's changed. So that's good. Let's quickly save that. Okay, so while we are also talking about authentication, let me actually finish one more quick thing which I want to show you guys, which will be probably under, let's see, it should be probably under external identity sources, right? So under external identity sources, make sure you go to certificate authentication profile, right? So this is kind of like a identity source which will be used for validating your certificates. I mean, certificate based authentication actually works completely independent of this, but it's kind of like, think of it as an identity source needed for your certificate based authentication, right? So you can click on the one which is there default and make sure that the identity which is basically used, right, is nothing but the subject common name, right? So the common name which will basically be used in your certificate will actually be used as an identity for that session and for that user, right? So that's, you can change this to any other field if you want, depending upon how your certificate is framed. In my case, my certificate, the common name basically on the certificate is actually representing the identity of the user. So I am using this. Okay, so make sure that is enabled. Okay, so that's everything about authentication. So we did this, we looked at the authentication policy, right? I mean, I don't have any specific conditions. If you want to make your network more and more secure, maybe you can explicitly mention EAP-TLS as a protocol, right? If you're enabling only EAP-TLS for the network. In my case, I'm allowing all protocols, so there is no filter here, right? Everything for wireless via .1x basically comes in here, irrespective of, you know, though it is PEEP or EAP-Fast or EAP chaining, whatnot, everything basically comes down here. And if the authentication passes, we jump onto the authorization section. And authorization section, we are going to have two important things which we'll have to plug here. Okay, so what are those two things? Let's go and do that. So first thing would be, where do we put it? Let's put it at the top, right? So insert row above. The first one is, let's call it as, I don't know, maybe this one is, because the job of this guy is to just do a BYOD redirect, right? So let me call that policy name as BYOD redirect. You can give any name you want. So I'm just going to give something like that, right? So when a valid employee connects to the network, he has to be redirected to the BYOD portal. That's the main objective. So let's go to conditions. And in the conditions, let's probably go to maybe, we'll use something like, so let's assume that the user who is basically connecting to the network the first time, they're going to use something like MSChap v2, right? So let's go to network, let's scroll down. Okay, network access authentication method, and I'll go with MSChap v2, right? Depending on your network, you can change this. In my VM, I'm basically going to be using this. Okay, so I'm going to use that. So that's the one condition, that's the first condition which is needed. And from the profiles, I'm going to use the redirect profile which I just now created, right? Mango BYOD redirect. There you go. Okay, so that's the first authorization policy which is out there. Next, let's create one more above. So this is basically the step number one, right? But in phase number two, what happens? once the user has registered their device, right, to what? They registered the device on the BYOD portal, we need to make sure that the user can now connect to the network, right, as just like you would connect like a corporate asset, right? So we'll have to put that condition now. Okay, so let's do that. So let's come to let's call this as, I don't know, maybe let's call this now as employee BYOD, right? Because it's no longer just, I mean, when it comes here, we know for sure that the user is a valid user, is an employee of a company, and he has registered the device, which means he should be given access like any other, user on any other corporate device, right? So this is the second authorization rule or the policy, which is important. And in the conditions of this, what kind of authentication are we looking at? We are looking at EAP-TLS. So the authentication method will be the certificate, right? So let's go and do that. Let's go here, let's scroll down. Okay, authentication method, and this time we are going to use what? Not MSCHAP. MSCHAP is when the user is a valid user but he doesn't have certificate on his laptop. But now we have provisioned his laptop with the right certificates, right? Now he has to use what? He has to use the certificate. So we're going to say X509 PKI. Okay. What else? Let's also probably add, let's put an operation called AND here, right? Operation called and we can probably add, let's also verify that the endpoint, or basically the device, has gone through the BYOD registration, right? So there is a way to do that. So can I do that here? New, okay, that's good. So here we will go with the endpoint. So for endpoint, I think we gotta use the same thing. Let's scroll down. Do we have endpoint in this one? CD. Yeah, there you go, endpoint. And there is something called BYOD registration, and I'm gonna say yes. Sweet, right? So we have checked that. Let's see. Let's say use. Do we want anything else? So we are checking for two things. Maybe we can also check, the other thing is obviously we need one more. We need to check, let me think. We need to check if the user, basically we are already obtaining the identity of the user from the common name of the certificate, right? Probably we can use that information to check against our AD, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to add, so this is already AND. So I'm going to say new. Let's come here and let's select this one over here. And there you go. We have the Mango AD, right? This is our Active Directory. And in that Active Directory, I'm going to quickly check if we have, which is the one we'll be using, employees. Okay, there you go, right? So maybe just on the mix, we can also make sure that we are getting the authentication from EAP-TLS. There you go, right? Awesome. So I think we are good. We've got enough number of conditions here. You can add more conditions if you want to scrutinize your policy as much as possible. I'm happy with this, so we are good, right? So yeah, so all of these conditions are matching. Then we want to consider that particular device and that particular user as a corporate asset now. So because he's on the wireless, I'm going to give corporate asset wireless. Cool. I think that's it, guys. Let's go and save this. Okay, cool. Now there is one more important piece which is kind of left to the last. Okay, what's that piece? Now what are we trying to do here? The user initially has just authenticates to the network using MSCHAP, right, which is just username password. And as part of the whole BYOD, we are provisioning the device with the right certificates, right? We are authenticating, we are provisioning the certificates. And to provision the certificates, you need what we call as a certificate authority, correct? Now in our case, the certificate authority, let's go and look at that a little bit. So if you go to administration and you go to certificates here, This is one of the most important section in ISE, right? And I've talked about this before. I've talked about how you can add a certificate authority, how you can sign your ISE with the certificate authority in my previous videos. You can go and check in the series. But here what we're going to do is slightly different, right? So what do we have? But before that, let's look at this system certificate. This is basically all the certificates which have been signed to be used in our ISE. So you can see there is a certificate for BYOD, right? Make sure you have this certificate, otherwise your BYOD portal will not come up. So make sure you have that. And I have certificates for, this was probably the certificate for ISE itself, which was signed by the CA. You have a certificate for guest portal and so on. Trusted certificates are basically certificates of the CA servers which ISE is going to trust. So make sure this is my CA server, and I have imported my CA server certificate in my list of trusted certificates. There are some other well-known certificates as well, like DigiCert and all, but I'm using my on-prem CA, so I have imported that. Next is probably, let's look at this certificate authority. Now, like I said, as part of this whole BYOD provisioning, we are trying to provision certificates. We are trying to issue certificates to whom? To the clients. So I need a CA, correct? So there are two options, or probably more than that, but I can just think of two for now. So if you go to external CA settings here, you can actually add, right, a CA server, and CA server will generally look like this. So this is my CA server, right? So if you go to your CA server search serve URL, you'll basically have it like this, right? You can request a certificate, you can do all of the cool things here. This is a very common CA server. So I can basically I can basically attach that CA server, and using SCEP, right, it's a simple protocol using which I can make my external CA server issue certificates. That's option number one. Or ISE itself acts as a CA server as well. So you can configure that, right? And you can make ISE work as a root CA server and issue certificates. So that's another option, right? But there's one more cool option. So okay, so I think I was wrong. So there are actually probably three steps or three ways of doing it. There's another way wherein you can configure ISE as not as a root CA server, but as a intermediate CA. And I like that approach. It's pretty simple and easy to do it, right? So what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to configure my ISE as an intermediate CA, not as a prominent or a main root CA, but intermediate. My root will still be my on-prem CA, right? So yeah, how do you do that intermediate stuff? So for that, you need to go to, let's go to certificate management. Let's go to CSRs, and you say generate a CSR. Okay, so you generate a CSR. Let me see if I have some old CSR. Let me delete it, otherwise it might overwrite it or something. So let's delete this something old which I have, right? Okay, so you come here and you say what purpose. So I want to generate a ISE intermediate CA, and I'm going to say generate. Okay, export. And now once that is done, there you go. I'm going to save that file. Okay, so my my intermediate CA's CSR, right, which is certificate signing request, got generated. What is the next step? I need to sign this. So I'll go to my CA server, and I'm going to say request a certificate. Go to advanced certificate request, and here let's do this. Do you want to reload it? Yes. So this is the, okay, maybe so that you don't think I'm just doing something wrong here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my downloads folder. I'm going to open that file which I just now downloaded. There you go. Let's copy that. Okay, make sure you copy the whole thing and come here and paste it. Okay, make sure in the certificate template you select what? There should be something for subordinate certificate authority. Yeah, you select that and you say submit. Go to base 64, download certificate and save. Okay, so now you have saved. You can come down here, and where do you go? So come back to the certificate signing request. Just click on that. You get something like this. Click on this guy, say bind, click on browse, select the certificate which was signed by the CA, open, give some name. I'm gonna say what? ISE intermediate. Is the spelling right? Yeah. Okay, ISE, I'll say ICA intermediate, right? So yeah, that's good. I'm going to say submit. So now it will take few seconds to kind of save that. Okay, so it's basically currently it's importing this intermediate certificate which I just now uploaded. So let's wait for a minute maybe. All right, so I think I'm happy with that. See, it got imported. And to verify, what you can do is you can probably come down to certificate authority certificates, and you can see here. Probably let me issued by, let's see if I can filter here, valid from. Can I filter based on this? Probably not, but let's look at the dates. What did I do today? I think probably, what's today's date? Can I see it here? Let's refresh this. Okay, maybe this is the one, right? So intermediate services CA, is that the one? Okay, I have a feeling probably because I just did this today, I mean I had generated a CSR, so I think it did not replace because my older certificate is still valid, right? But you should basically be able to see it over here in this section, right? You should see your intermediate CA server certificate which you just now signed up here. Okay, so that's your validation. So I think now I don't know if we have done all the steps, and if we have, we should be good to go and test it out, right? So let's go to the Radius live logs, and yeah, that's what we have. You can see my latest authentication has come from a user called Eric, and after that we are going to now do what we intend to do. So let's come here, and this is my client, right? This is the same client which I used in the previous video for doing guest portals, right? So this is a client which and we are assuming for a minute that yeah, this is a client which probably a employee has packed it in their bag and they've gotten it to the office. Maybe it's a Windows laptop, right? And what they are trying to do now, they're trying to register this device to BYOD, right? And let's see how that workflow goes through. Apologies if it is not going to work in the very first try. We'll probably troubleshoot and make it work. Okay, cool. So coming here, let's go to our corporate SSID, right? This is the one which I showed you earlier. So I'm going to connect. Okay, it's going to ask me for username, password. I'm going to go with mango/eva. So this is the employee of my company, right? It's mango/eva. That's a username because I have an AD which is set up, and you can, just to make sure that I'm not lying, I can show you that. See, this is my AD and my corporate set of users. I have, let's go to corp, and there you go. So I have someone called Eva, right? So this is the user which we are using. So we are assuming that Eva has got a Windows laptop, which is not a corporate asset, but she has got it from her home, right? And she's trying to authenticate. So let's put that again, mango/Eva, and the password. Okay, so let's see, the password is good. Yep, and we're going to say okay. Connect. Okay, there you go. It's automatically trying to do something. It's opened the browser and it is trying to redirect. There you go. It's telling BYOD welcome. Good. Till this point it is good. Let's quickly, or maybe it's fine, we can look at the ISE later. Let's say go to next. Okay, that's good. So when you went to the next, you can see the device ID is already populated. What is this device ID? This is nothing but my MAC address. So I'm going to just copy it for future use if I need. Device name, what do you want? I'm going to give something very simple, right? I'm going to say Eva's, I don't know, maybe Windows 7, right? I'm going to say Eva's Windows 7. Description is not mandatory, so we'll skip it. Continue. Okay, as soon as I hit continue, you see I got a file. I got a binary file which I can save. So that file is getting downloaded. This is basically the agent which I was talking about, right? So let's click on that agent and let's open that agent. There you go. The agent is opening. Let's say start. So this is now downloading the profile, and it is telling that there is some old certificate. Do you want to delete it? I'm going to say yes. And this is the new certificate, and it's asking, should I trust the certificate coming from, you know, the Mango CA, right? because Mango CA is not a well-known certificate authority. It's an on-prem one, right? So it's giving me this warning. But that's fine. I'm gonna say yes. So my ISE in the background is, you know, sending the certificate, right, a signed certificate to my client, which the client will use for authentication in the upcoming cycles, right? That's what we are intending. Okay, so let's wait. So let's go. So this is what I was talking about, right? This is the app, and we could actually use this as is because it's a Windows or in a Mac OS, right? But you can't do the same approach in Android because, you know, ISE is not authorized to install apps on your Android phone. Only Google Play Store can do it. So in that case, the slight difference would be you will have to open Google Play Store and install a particular app which will actually do the setting for you. Okay, so there you go. It's installed. Everything looks like. So I'm gonna say exit. Okay, let's come back here, and there you go. Looks like it is connected now, guys. So let's probably, can we access Mango systems? There you go. I can access the internal network now, right? It's connected. Let's go to my ISE and let's observe what's happened. So let's refresh the logs. There you go. What we have here, we saw things still Eric, right? This was the last one which we saw, but we see what happens after that. So this is exactly what has happened. So if you scroll to the right and if you observe this row, you can see, maybe let's observe stuff on the right side here, right? The very first authorization policy which hit was this one, right? And it hit this because it is the BYOD redirect, correct? So you can see here it hit this because the user put in the MSChap v2 username password, right? And it got redirected to the BYOD redirect authorization result. Okay, so ISE figured out that, okay, the user is trying to put in the correct username password, but the device from where the authentication is coming doesn't seem to have the certificate. That's why the user is trying to put the username password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redirect it to a BYOD portal, and it got redirected, and the user went and registered the device. And once they registered the device, you can see the second time when the authentication came in, the authentication came using what? Using certificate based authentication, the certificate which was installed, correct? And that's why you can see the employee BYOD got triggered and the user basically got the access to the network, right? So that's mainly it, guys. Let me also show you one other important piece, which is let's go to BYOD probably, or maybe let's go to BYOD portals. And here in the portal on the left hand side, you'll see one more portal called My Devices portal, right? And you can actually set up a My Devices portal. Now in my case, I'm just going to just click on the portal test URL, and there you go. That's my devices portal. And I'm going to log in as what? I'm going to log in as the user, right? Mango/EVA. That's my domain and username, and with the password, right, I'm going to say sign on, and don't save that, continue, and there you go, right? The device which we just now provisioned is available here. So also, in addition to that, you also have provision to I mean, you can, in your organization, if you trust the users, probably you can just give them the URL, the My Devices portal, so that they can probably, add devices, delete devices, and do stuff to it, right? So that's the other stuff. You can also delete stuff from here as well if you need, right? So just wanted to throw it out there that you can do all of this. Okay, so that's mainly it, guys. So we looked at the whole complete workflow of how to set up the single SSID BYOD onboarding, right from scratch, from the WLC configuration to the ISE configuration, and we tested it. We also looked quickly at the My Devices portal as well, right? Hope you guys liked it, and do come back for more videos. Thanks a lot. Bye.